My parents showed so much favoritism toward my twin sister that they spent the money set aside for my wedding on her instead. Because of this, I cut them off after saying no to my mom's self-centered request. I'm 23 and have a twin sister, Allison, who I don't get along with. Actually, I'm not even speaking to her or my parents right now. We used to be on speaking terms, despite how they treated me in the past. But for the last 2 years, I've stayed away, and they didn't bother reaching out until recently. Allison is 12 minutes older than me, making her the golden child by default just because she was born first. My parents initially only wanted one child. That was their plan, and they didn't think they could afford two. By the time they found out they were having twins, it was too late, and my mom didn't want to risk anything. I learned this in high school from my drunk uncle at a Thanksgiving party. That day was basically when I stopped trying to win my parents over. They had done what people in that situation might do. They had 2 kids but decided they would only love one. That one turned out to be Allison, not me. From the time we were little, the rivalry between Allison and me was crazy. Everything she did, I'd try to do better, just to impress our parents. But it seemed they just hated me more for outdoing their favorite. To be honest, Allison wasn't really interested in being better than me. She just wanted people to pay attention to her. So she'd pretend she cared about our competition. I have to admit, she was good at manipulating people into believing she was genuinely hurt when I did things better. This made a lot of people comfort her and put me down to make her feel better. This group included my parents, some relatives, and even people from high school. So, looking back, what I got from our competition was good grades and lots of after-school activities because I wanted to be better than my sister. What she got was attention, validation, and sympathy from our parents and other people because I was clearly seen as the bad guy for making her feel less than. I don't think I'd trade my achievements, but I sure wish I could have rubbed it in her face more back then. Then, 2 years ago, we celebrated our 21st birthday. We had both graduated by then. She graduated from a regular college, but I graduated from one of the top business schools in the state. Not only that, I was the valedictorian and had a scholarship, which meant my parents saved a lot on my education. Call me crazy, but I actually expected my parents to be happy about it. They weren't. They only focused on Allison and her future because she had barely passed her classes. We both moved back home. I was already working from home as an intern at a firm, while Allison was still looking for jobs and getting rejected constantly. My parents cared more about that and didn't even congratulate me on my achievements. I couldn't say I was surprised, but I was definitely disappointed. I tried to hide it because I was still living with them and hadn't saved enough to move out. I decided to just keep quiet about how I felt, but after our 21st birthday, I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I expected them to do something special for us, but the day before our birthday, I found out they had all left me home alone. All they left was a note saying they were going to the beach with Allison and her friends and would be back in a few days. I still remember feeling completely crushed when I read that note. They took Allison and her friends on a beach trip, and all I got was a happy birthday note and a $50 gift card. A lot of things in my childhood were unfair, but that was where I drew the line. It was so incredibly disappointing and heartless of them that I decided right then to move out and never look back. I had a couple of friends who said I could stay with them until I found my own place and could afford it, which wouldn't take long because the firm where I was interning would likely hire me after the internship. So, I only needed a place to stay for maybe 2 months at most. I packed my things and moved in with a friend without telling my parents or sister. I haven't looked back since. They didn't miss me enough to ask me to come back either. They did call me on my birthday, the day after I moved out, but they didn't call to wish me a happy birthday. They called to tell me they'd be back soon and that I should probably call a plumber to fix a leaky faucet. I told them I wasn't living at home anymore and had moved out, thinking that information would at least get some kind of reaction from them. No such luck. My parents seemed fine with it, and Allison didn't care. So, that was it. That was the last time I had a real conversation with my family. Since then, I haven't gone back to see them, and I haven't heard from them directly. I did hear about Allison sometimes from my friends a couple of times, and that's how I stayed updated on her life. But that's all. My friends didn't know anything about my parents, and my parents didn't know anything about me. I've worked hard over the past 2 years, and now I have my own place. It's not a huge house, but it's a nice apartment in a good neighborhood. The rent is affordable with my income, which is great because most people my age haven't been able to get here so quickly. I'm happy with how my life has turned out, and I've tried my best to keep my family out of my thoughts. I know that Allison got married a few months ago to some businessman almost 10 years older than her and is now living comfortably in California. I thought everything was settled with my family, but 2 days ago, I got a call from my uncle telling me I needed to visit my parents quickly because they'd been in a really bad car crash and wanted to see me. I rushed to the hospital as soon as I could because, of course, I'm not completely heartless. When I got there, I found out they had already been in the hospital for a few days and were recovering from their injuries. A truck had hit their car, and they survived but were seriously hurt. They didn't have health insurance, because my dad had always believed that if we just took care of ourselves, we wouldn't need the hospital at all, which is honestly one of the most foolish things I've ever heard. They had first contacted my sister, but she told them she wasn't going to come back or help them. Apparently, it was tacky for our parents to ask for financial help from their rich son-in-law so soon after their wedding, and she didn't want to seem like a gold digger to her husband. She also didn't want to fly back because she couldn't just leave her home and her 2 kids. They aren't even her own kids. They're her husband's from a previous marriage. But she was too busy playing happy family with her husband's family to come see her own parents in the hospital after a terrible car accident. But it's not like she could have helped them with the bills even if she wanted to, because if her husband wasn't there for her, she wouldn't have been able to afford even the plane tickets back home, seeing as she's just a stay-at-home mom now to kids who aren't hers. So much for being the favorite daughter and the golden child. I couldn't believe they hadn't even had the decency to call me first, but it got even more frustrating when my uncle said my parents now wanted me to pay for their medical expenses. It's obviously a huge amount, and it would take me a long time to financially recover from a loss like that. I don't want to spend so much, especially on people who never cared for me or showed me any love my entire life. I know they have other family who can help them, and even if I don't pay, someone else will. It's just that it would probably be more embarrassing for them to take money from others, and they'd definitely have to pay it back a lot sooner than they would have had to pay me back. At least, that's what they told me while asking me to cover the bills and even promised I'd get the money back quickly. So, I don't know. I'm in a difficult spot right now. I can either embarrass my parents by refusing to pay their medical bills and look out for myself, or I can pay for them, lose my own money, and then keep waiting for them to pay me back. To be completely honest, I don't want to pay for them at all. We haven't spoken in the last 2 years, and things have been bad between me and my family for as long as I can remember. They feel like strangers to me now, so I don't feel very obligated to help them out. But then, that would mean I'm no better than Allison, which would feel bad. So, I was wondering if I'm wrong for not wanting to help my parents pay their hospital bills after they were in a really bad car accident. Update 1. Hey everyone, I decided not to help my parents. It was a really hard decision to make, but honestly, I knew their bills would be taken care of anyway, so they didn't have anything to worry about. They only asked me because they didn't want to ask their other relatives and were being too proud. I haven't told them about it yet, though. How do you even tell your family you're not going to help your parents cover their medical expenses after they've been in such a terrible accident? It's been almost 5 days since I saw them. After reading the comments, I realized I was still subconsciously competing with Allison. She didn't help our parents, so I felt like I needed to step up and prove I was the better daughter or whatever. I guess I'll never be able to get rid of that competitive side of me, no matter how hard I try. It's just who I am now. Most of the comments said it was stupid of my parents not to have health insurance, and I agree. It was really stupid of my father to discourage that. If I had been a bigger part of their lives, I would have made sure he got insurance. He didn't even have car insurance because he thought he was such a great driver. They're lucky the accident was the truck driver's fault, because otherwise the cost of the car repairs would also be coming out of their own pockets. Coming to their financial situation, which a lot of you asked about, to sum it up, I'd say my parents are doing okay. They're not rich, but they're not poor either. My dad is the head of sales at the company he works for, and my mother works in HR at a smaller firm. Their combined income is enough for them, and since they no longer have to support me or Allison, I'd say they have enough. Growing up, Allison and I didn't have to worry about money, but of course we couldn't live lavishly either. We were comfortably in the middle, and they still are. But I can't figure out why my parents wouldn't be able to pay for their bills themselves. If they can borrow money but then promise to return it eventually, they can surely just pay the bills themselves. They haven't told me the reason why either, and I don't think I'll find out after this. Update 2. I told my parents I won't be paying for their expenses. They'd been calling me for the past week, and yesterday, I finally realized I couldn't just ignore them and let this go on until they were out of the hospital. So, I answered their calls and told them I had thought about it and didn't feel the need to help them. As expected, they didn't take it well and were very angry. My mom completely attacked me and yelled as loudly as she could with her broken ribs. She called me ungrateful and other things, the usual stuff. My dad just told me I was no longer their daughter and hung up after my mom finished yelling. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would because I hadn't felt like their daughter for a really long time anyway. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I felt loved by my parents, and they hadn't spoken to me on purpose or checked up on me for 2 years just because I moved out after they ignored me on an important birthday. So I'd never really had parents anyway. I'm just going to continue living my life the way I have for the last 2 years, and probably even before that. This honestly doesn't make that big of a difference to me, despite what my parents might have thought. Unfortunately, my uncle did call me after my phone call with my parents to give me another lecture, but I hung up after the first few seconds. I didn't need that from other people. They could think whatever they wanted about me. It just didn't matter to me at this point. My uncle then texted me to tell me they still had other family to arrange the money from, and that since things had come to this, my parents had decided to use the money from the fund they'd set aside for our weddings. They had already spent more than half of the wedding fund on Allison's wedding, and whatever little money they had left after that, they spent on a trip to Europe. That's why they barely had any savings left, and that's why they couldn't pay for themselves. So, that mystery is solved. Of course, my uncle told me all of this to try and make me feel bad, but all it made me feel was relief that I hadn't spent my hard-earned money on my parents' bills. They had spent their own savings carelessly, and that wasn't my fault. Their not having insurance because of their own unrealistic beliefs was also not my fault. Now they could borrow money from their relatives or go to hell, but I wasn't giving them anything. They weren't entitled to anything of mine anymore, not my time and definitely not my money. Update 3. Hey, so something really weird happened today, and I need to share this. I haven't been able to tell my friends about any of this because most people I know right now haven't known me for long, and I don't think I want to reveal anything about my family history to them right now. So, Reddit is all I have. Anyway, it's been almost 2 weeks since I last spoke to my parents. A couple of hours ago in the evening, Allison showed up at my place. I was surprised by her sudden visit. First of all, I didn't think she'd know where I was living. But one of our old friends from high school told her the neighborhood I lived in, and she did some asking around to find out exactly where I was. That was a lot of effort for her to make just to see me, of all people. She also looks and acts very differently from how I remembered. She's become more refined and sophisticated, I think. And that's been a huge change because before, she used to talk like she was still in high school, but now she sounds more proper somehow and even behaves better. Her way of dressing has changed, the jewelry she wears has changed, and even her makeup. It honestly felt like I wasn't even talking to Allison today. Everything about her seems to have gotten older suddenly. But one thing that hasn't changed is her personality. I guess you can't cover up your true self with makeup and tell people to call it Mrs. Davis, like she did with herself. Her personality and beliefs definitely haven't changed at all. I let her in after she knocked at my door. I was really surprised to see her, but I was also curious about why she had come by, so I decided to talk to her. After some small talk about her life, where she told me everything she'd been up to without me even asking, and bragged about how amazing her life was as a stay-at-home mom of 2 toddlers married to a wealthy guy with nothing to worry about except her nails, I waited for her to get to the point. I politely nodded while she went on and on about how wonderfully underrated being a traditional housewife was. She was even giving me advice to do the same. So, I really couldn't wait for her to finish talking about unimportant things and get to the real reason she was here. She finally did after about 15 minutes of talking about her life. She told me she had come back home, on her own, because our parents had apparently been begging her to come see them after the accident. They didn't want her money. They just wanted her to be there for them. So, after 2 weeks, she had finally come back and figured she'd come to see me too so we could bury the hatchet. So far, so good. But then, she started complaining about how needy our parents were and that they were being disrespectful of her new family. She went on and on about how she had to leave her 2 babies with their nanny just so she could visit them, and that she hated our parents for making her choose between them and her kids. I'll never understand why she keeps calling them her kids when they're obviously not hers. She told me a lot about her marriage and her husband, even though I hadn't asked. From what I gathered, the guy she married probably only married her to improve his chances of getting at least partial custody of his kids, which he did, but she seemed to think he actually loved her or something. He had been in the custody battle for quite some time, and since he was a full-time businessman, he didn't have much time for his kids. His ex-wife was using that against him. But then, he announced that he was engaged and getting married as soon as the divorce was final, and that turned things in his favor. Allison told me all of this while bragging about how she had saved those kids, but it just sounded to me like her husband had used her. They hadn't even known each other for more than a year when he asked her to marry him, so it was very clear he wasn't in love with her. Nobody falls in love that quickly, especially after a divorce. But she seemed completely unaware of it. Or maybe she knew he didn't love her but was willing to ignore that because of his huge bank account and was okay with being a basically paid nanny to her husband's kids. On top of that, she was mad at her own parents for wanting her to be by their side after they had been in a really bad accident because that was somehow taking away from her time with her new family, which consisted of a husband who probably didn't even love her much and 2 kids who weren't related to her at all and were doing just as well with their nanny as they were with her. If the word ungrateful ever had a face, it would be Allison's. I'm no fan of my parents myself, but honestly, when she was talking to me about how they were being too needy, I couldn't even believe this was the girl they had rejected me over and over again for. Then she got to the real point of her visit. She told me she'd be leaving in 2 days. She had promised Mom and Dad she'd stay for at least a month, but she claimed she was already bored of listening to them talk about the accident and how they'd had the worst experience of their lives for the 10th time and needed to get back home soon. So now, she wanted me to make up with them and take her place because she didn't want to feel the guilt of knowing she had left her parents when they needed her to be there. She didn't know that they had cut me off yet again because I refused to help them with the bills. This is probably because they don't talk about me or even think of me, so they didn't bring it up with Allison. She was here because she wanted sympathy from me for having to deal with our parents and having to leave her family, and now she wanted to use that sympathy to her advantage and make me step into her shoes and become our parents' emotional support because she didn't feel like doing it herself. It was just classic Allison manipulation, but I knew it all too well and didn't fall for it. I also had no intention of telling her the truth while she was at my place, as that would definitely lead to a fight. So I told her I'd try, but I know I won't. She left after telling me to keep in touch, but we both know she didn't mean that. I was actually glad to see her leave because not only is she a terrible and self-centered person, but she was also really boring to talk to. I could barely get a word in while she droned on about her uninteresting life in California. It basically just involves parties, her stepchildren, and her husband. She thinks she's living the dream life, but I thought it was really sad since clearly her husband doesn't love her, and her kids spend half their time with their biological mom anyway. So of course they're going to grow up to prefer their bio mom over Allison, and probably do so even now from what I heard. But it's okay because that's the life she chose for herself, and the life I choose for myself is going to be one that is very, very far away from my family, because they really don't deserve even a small bit of my attention or sympathy. If anything, today taught me that I was right to distance myself from my parents and my sister because I do not want to be a part of these people's lives. They are incredibly selfish and cruel, and I seriously doubt they're even capable of thinking about anyone other than themselves, especially Allison. I'm honestly ashamed that I'm even related to people like this. At least now, I've been able to cut ties with all of them for good, and it's not likely they'll be able to get in touch with me anytime soon. I blocked Allison as soon as she left, and I've already had my parents and other relatives blocked for a few days now. So, I think I'm safe from being bothered by my family for at least the near future. I'll hope they don't get back in touch with me after this either, because I'm way better off without them.